Here's game Checkmate Introduction, game number 2, Dutch Defense, London, 1912, Edward Lasker versus Sir George A. Thomas. Pawn, Queen 4, Pawn, King 3, Knight, King, Bishop 3, Knight, King, Bishop 4, Pawn, King, Bishop 4, Knight, Bishop 3, Knight, King, Bishop 3, Bishop, Knight 5, Bishop, King 2, Bishop takes Knight, Bishop takes Bishop, Pawn, King 4, Pawn takes Pawn, Knight takes Pawn, Pawn, Queen, Knight 3, Knight, King 5, castles, Bishop, Queen 3, Bishop, Knight 2, Queen, Rook 5, with the impending various mates. Now it's impossible to parry the threatening attack on Black's King, Rook 2, this pawn here, by playing Pawn, King, Rook 3. Because White would just play then Queen, Knight 6 and win. And so now what about Pawn, Knight 3? So then we have Knight takes Pawn, Pawn takes Knight, Queen takes Pawn check, Bishop, Knight 2, Knight, Knight 5, and wins. So now let's back up. Don't save. Alright, so we're backing up here to the 9th move of the game. Let's see what just happened. Black just played Bishop, Knight 2. Queen, Rook 5. Queen, King 2. The text move seems to save the game, for Black's King, Rook 2 is covered by the Queen after Knight takes Bishop check. Pawn takes Knight. This position, however, is full of hidden possibilities, as the one in the Morphy game that we have just quoted. Edward Lasker announced mate in 8 moves. Queen takes Pawn check. King takes Queen. Knight takes Bishop double check. King, Rook 3. Knight 5 to Knight 4 check. King, Knight 4. Pawn, King, Rook 4 check. Knight, or King, Bishop 5. Pawn, King, Knight 3 check. King, Bishop 6. Bishop, King 2 check. King, Knight 7. Rook, Rook 2 check. King, Knight 8. King, Queen 2 mate. Or what didn't happen but looks even more clever, queenside castle. Checkmate. So now, this death march of the king seems amazing to the beginner, but since all the moves are forced, the combination can be calculated accurately without considerable mental effort. Here also, no definite rule can be laid down. The idea is to snatch the king from its initial square, and by checking it constantly, to lead it to the fatal mating square. It is a question of rapid judgment, imagination, and practice. To be able to mate in a definite position, 2 conditions are required. 1, to be aware of the possible mate, and 2, to be able to carry it out. We have therefore endeavored to classify methodically all the such positions, and for each one we have given the mating process. We then give 3 practical examples to illustrate each mate. The first includes games which end with the typical mate. The second includes games which end in a variation or modification of the typical mate. The third is rather more complicated. Between strong players, it is rare that such typical mates occur. In most cases, there is just the threat of a mate. In order to avoid it, the opponent is compelled to make a defensive move, which either weakens his position or results in loss of material. In 95 games out of 100, the 2 opponents castle, and 90 times out of 100, they castle on the king's side. We shall therefore suppose, in the examples we are about to give, that all attacks are delivered against a castle position on the king's side. And if such an attack is to take place, certain preliminary conditions have to be fulfilled. 1. The castle position must show a weakness. There are 2 kinds of weaknesses. Weakness A is a permanent and irrevocable one, such as the advance of one of the pawns protecting the castle position. Like the pawn in front of the rook, the king, the empty space, the rook, or the king itself. And type B are temporary ones, such as the removal of a piece which defended the castle position. For instance, the removal of the king's knight, or one of the pieces which protected the king's knight, or the king's bishop on king 2, or the queen knight on queen 2, or the queen on queen 1. And the second preliminary condition is the possibility of exploiting such a weakened position. For this, it is necessary to have A. Open lines, either files, ranks, or diagonals, on the castle position of the opponent. B. Pieces on these open lines. And C. More pieces for the attack than the opponent has for the defense. It is immaterial whether the defender's total number of pieces is superior to the attacker's. The important point is that these pieces have neither the time nor the opportunity to reach the crucial defensive spot. These are the principles which will constantly be used. They are equally applicable to positional and tactical play. In fact, they rule the conduct of the game. Although the scope of this study is limited to typical mating positions, we will, we hope, initiate the reader gradually into general methods of play. The best way to learn the principles of the game is to see their application in the most dramatic situations of the chessboard, mate which can be announced in a definite number of moves. Before we end this introduction, let us remind the reader that, although these typical mating positions are met often, the mates do not always occur. In fact, they rarely occur with players of equal strength. One of them may resign because he has lost a piece, or even a pawn, or he may realize that the end game is hopeless. Let the reader therefore not imagine that he will always be able to force a typical mate, or even think he may sacrifice pieces at random. Each mate demands the fulfillment of certain conditions, and if one of the conditions is missing, the sacrifice is useless, and will simply leave the player with 1 or 2 pieces down in a lost game. Let us be bold by all means. It is the only way to victory, but let us be cautious as well.